Welcome to Adapted, the podcast where we explore adaptations of various forms. I'm today's host, Tom, and with me is
Pat.
And KJ.
Today we'll be discussing Ripley's Game from 1974 and its adaptation, The American Friend from 1977. Patricia Highsmith, born in Texas, died in Switzerland, wrote 22 novels and became famous after Alfred Hitchcock adapted her first novel, Strangers on a Train, written in 1950. In 1955, she brought us The Talented Mr. Ripley, the first of 5 novels featuring the Epicurean psychopath, serial killer, Tom Ripley. And what we see then in 1974 is the third book in the series, Ripley's Game, comes out, and before it's even published, a manuscript falls into the hands of German film director. He's kind of part of this German New Wave movement that had people like Fassbinder in it. It falls into his hands. She gives it to him, and he starts adapting it even before it's published. It's published in 74. I think the movie comes out in 76, I think that is. And anyway, the book itself follows a now married Tom Ripley who helps a British man living in Germany named Jonathan Trevenay to kill a few mafia members after tricking Jonathan into thinking he is about to die of leukemia. Ripley, for some reason, becomes wrapped with guilt that Jonathan is going to die trying to kill one of these people. So he himself becomes involved in the murders, and this leads Ripley and Trevenay to be identified by the mafia and have to deal with the consequences of having the mafia come after them. And it becomes pseudo action book kind of as they're dealing with these mafia members. Wenders' film takes a different approach, borrowing story elements from Ripley Underground, the second book in the series from 1970. Jonathan becomes Jonathan Zimmerman, a German tasked with the murders, and Ripley becomes an American cowboy living in Germany alone, recording himself saying nonsense like, quote, "I know less and less about who I am and about who anyone else is," end quote. These are recordings he listens to over and over again for some reason. So we see Wenders and Dennis Hopper make Highsmith's Epicurean killer into a sort of stoned pool hall hustler. And then we watch this kind of slow burn version of this somewhat short, tight, weird little book. And it's a quite a strange adaptation of the different adaptations I've seen of Ripley material, and there's a bunch of adaptations of Ripley stories. I think this is the weirdest one. Um, but I want to kind of start with the books. I've read the first 3 this week, and I had to say I really enjoyed them, but I think they are probably far more disturbing than anything else we've read for this season, including the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. That book has some pretty violent criminal activity. I don't think the criminal activity in any of these books are as violent, but I found this far more creepy. I mean by that the Ripley books. And I was wondering what you guys, well, Pat, who read them, what do you think gives these books this kind of quality of being like really kind of odd or unsettling?
I only read Talented Mr. Ripley. I didn't read the other two, but I did reid Talented Mr. Ripley.
Which I
And
think is probably the most unsettling.
yeah, I can't say if it is. It's the most unsettling of the ones that I read, but that's
It's
um,
also the least unsettling of the ones
it's
I read.
also the least unsettling of the Ripley novels that I read. Um, also shows why you can't use the word least or most when you only have one.
Hmm.
But the no, I mean, it was interesting because I have a pretty vivid memory of actually, it's got to be probably one of the earlier rated R movies that I ever saw of seeing Talented Mr. Ripley when I was a kid. And it's interesting because I had no until relatively recently, I didn't realize it was based on a book. So I remember seeing the movie, and it's the movie, the one with Matt Damon. I mean, it follows it reasonably closely. I don't know, have you seen it, Tom, or have you seen that one,
I
KJ?
have, yes.
No, I have not. I didn't realize. Well, we'll get into that. Yeah. No, I have not seen it.
Yeah, so you know, it's a it follows it reasonably closely. Like it makes some changes to it, but it's reasonably close adaptation. And I remember thinking at the time, I'm like, this is it's a creepy movie. Especially, I think that was Matt Damon trying to break out of his sort of pretty boy, nice guy kind of, from Boston, savant Academy Award winner phase. Like he was like, I want to go do some edgy, creepy stuff. And he's pretty creepy in it. I mean, he comes across as very boyish, and I remember like seeing some critics say like he's really creepy, but you sort of just like, oh, he's totally believable, he's totally kind. And then they go, he just kind of stares at the camera a little too long. Or it's just like he holds his smile a little bit too long. And you're like, oh, this man's insane. And then he kills a lot of people. As he goes through trying to basically steal his friend's identity, and he starts like dyeing his hair to look like his friend and wearing his clothes, and yeah, it's a very creepy um movie. And then when I found out later it's a book that's written in the 50s, it's a bit jarring. I think I'm assuming for a 1950s film. Again, if you've read, something like have you read The Killer Inside Me, Tom? Did you read that
I
one
have
or no?
not, no.
It's similar. Like it's sort of A Killer Inside Me is about a guy who basically is a serial killer in a small town, and he's the sheriff, so he's tasked with investigating the crimes that he himself has committed. So, needless to say, no one ever catches him, and so he just keeps, he sort of is like compelled. He feels like to murder. So it's a little, that one has sort of this edge of an individual feels he has to. He's just a true psychopath, whereas Ripley is much more, he's even creepier because he doesn't even really want to half the time, but when he needs to, he's like, well, I just have to do it. And then he murders them, and then he's convinces himself, he tells his story over and over to himself so much that he then convinces himself that that's actually what happened. And so he almost gets upset when, like, some of the police almost catch him or something comes out that might prove his story wrong. Like it's very, very creepy. And it's very effective writing. I'm It's weird, but I don't know 100% how well it often translates to the stage. I think it's very, or the film even. It's very hard to get the head of the character into film because of sort of what's going on. So that's why the 90s version is very good, but it doesn't quite capture the book as creepily as it could because it's so much this internal monologue of Ripley just going through his murders and doing all this stuff. It's sort of his thing. Um, so that's why this version is so weird because he's not that at all. Like he's not charming. Like, the Dennis Hopper is
Hmm.
not charming. You sort of get pretty early that this guy is just wackadoodle. He's not, it's not quite like Blue Velvet where he's huffing nitrous oxide, but you could see that. Like it's not that far removed from that kind of thing. So it's a weird adaptation in that sense. It's a very different feel to it. It almost doesn't feel like Ripley at all.
No, I agree. What I found so disturbing about the book, I'll make a comparison to have you read Love in the Time of Cholera, either of you?
No, I did 100 Years of Solitude, but not.
Red Hunter Your Solitude. I never read
Hmm.
Colorado.
Love in the Time of Cholera, which Gabriel Garcia Marquez described as his trap, appears to be this book that's somewhat like The Notebook about this long, struggling romance between these two people who not until they're in their 70s can they be together because of social situation and whatnot. But that's a complete trap. It's actually, the man is horrible, and you don't really notice it unless you're reading between the lines, unless you're reading carefully, that the romance of this book it's a trap. It's meant to suck you in. It's meant for you to miss the sort of weird thing that's actually going on between these people and with this man and these other women he seduces. And I think maybe more in the second book, but I think it's true in the first book as well. I think these are a bit of a trap where you're kind of rooting for Ripley to get away with it. And in the other books, it becomes even more true. You disagree, Pat?
I was going to say I don't think it's a trap. I think she's doing it very carefully and very intentionally.
Hmm.
It's not that she's trying to trick you into rooting for Ripley. She wants you to root for him.
Oh, yeah. But I think it's very easy to root for him, and it's very easy
Yeah.
to miss that, when Dickie dismisses him as being kind of a weirdo who he doesn't want to be around, it's not that Dickie's sort of selfish and self-involved, even though you can imagine him being a little bit of a spoiled brat. It's it's
He's
complete.
perceptive. He's picking up on the fact
He's
that this guy is whack.
Yeah, he's weird, and also there's that kind of gay element that's involved. Obviously,
Yeah,
Dickie's very worried that Tom is gay, which the 1999 version dials up a lot.
yeah.
Um, but even in the other books, there's the second book is about basically he's staged an art forgery ring, Ripley, and someone basically figures it out and it comes to his house and he doesn't know Tom's involved, but he realizes the painting he bought's a forgery. And he's like, "Hey man, I think this is a forgery. What do you think about this?" And then Tom kills him because he's figured it out.
That's
And
what
then
Tom does.
that's what Tom
It's
does.
just-
And then it just
and he
turns.
does it really cleverly every time.
Yeah, he doesn't do it too cleverly. It just beats him to death with a
I
bottle.
know,
But
but then he covers it up, and every single time, for some reason, he keeps getting away. It's
yeah,
interesting because you can absolutely see why he keeps getting away with these murders because he's pretty clever about covering them up. And yeah, usually they're you're right. The murder itself isn't clever. I mean,
mhm,
he beats Dickie to death with an oar on a
mhm.
boat. He's not clever in how he murders them, but he is very clever in how he covers them up, and he keeps managing to do it.
And I think he's the most clever in the towns of Mr. Ripley because he's got to keep track of where he is and where hypothetically Dickie is at any point in Italy or in Paris or in God, where Sicily at one point, which yes is a part of Italy, but he's pretty good. But I think in all of the books, what you end up doing, except the third book where they're killing mafia members who are sort of becoming stormtroopers at that point, it's kind of easy to kill mafia people. In that book, you are just the second book where he kills the guy who kind of figures out that there's this forgery going on. There's no, there is nothing wrong with the man who figures it out. I mean, at least with Dickie, you could say, he's kind of a spoiled rich kid. He's sort of rejecting Tom. This guy's just like, yeah, I don't think these paintings are real. I mean, I'm going to say something about it. And then the whole rest of the book, you're rooting for Tom to cover everything up and to keep everything going. And part of it is that the forger, who's actually in this movie for some reason, played by Nicholas Ray, of all people, the director of Rebel Without a Cause. I don't know why he's in this movie, but whatever.
That's random. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's a Nicholas Ray. Apparently, Europeans absolutely love his movies. Like they were like, cinema is Nicholas Ray. That was something like the French would say all the time. But anyway, um, and that guy, he's a character in the second book, and he's like always on the verge of committing suicide because he's forging these artworks and not doing his own artwork. And so Ripley's trying to keep him alive. So you're like really sympathetic to Ripley because, oh, look at him. He's trying to keep his friend alive. He's trying to take care of him. And it's like, he's trying to keep him alive so that he keeps forging art so he can make money. And he just beat a man to death. And no, you have no sense of like, I really don't want Tom to get away with it. And so by the end of the book, when again Tom gets away with it, because Tom always gets away with it, you're just, oh, thank God he got away with it. And like, there was nothing wrong. There was no like black stain on the man who murdered him that you can kind of justify it. So these books just feel like a really, really eerie trap. Um,
Well, that's why I mean I liked Talented Mr. Ripley the book because the movie again he smooths over some of the stuff to sort of I think the again I'm going off the Matt Damon one. They smooth over some of the sort of rougher plot points just to sort of make it easier in telling in a film, whereas the book has a lot of meandering, and especially at the end of the book, because the whole thing at the end of the book is that he basically has murdered multiple people at this point to cover up the fact that he murdered his friend, then took over his friend's life, was forging all of his friend's checks. Then his friend was getting accused of having murdered himself, Tom Ripley. So then Ripley comes back to be like, nope, not dead, but he can't now return as. So it's
mhm,
like this whole thing's going on. And then he decides at the end that he's going to forge a will from Dickie saying that all of Dickie's money, his millions and millions of dollars in trust, he wants to give to his good friend Tom. So Dickie is like, so you get to this whole thing, and basically Tom then is like, sends this letter off, is convinced he's going to get caught for it, gets on, takes a boat to Greece, is like he sees police when he's getting off, and you think, as a reader, you're thinking, oh, this is so disappointing. He's not going to get I mean, it is the way your mind works. It's the way she's written it very cleverly. Your mind kind of goes, oh, this poor guy isn't going to get the millions that he's got from murdering his friend and forging a will and sending it to his grieving father. Like, you're not thinking that. You're thinking like, oh, it's so disappointing. And then he walks right by the Greek police and they don't stop him. And he's like, oh, this is great. And then he gets the letter and he goes to pick up the letter at his hotel from his friend's father that he murdered, and basically saying, like, we're so glad you were such a good friend. And Dickie, we absolutely believe Dickie would have written this to you. And we're so glad that you'll get to enjoy his money. So you're like, oh my God, he gets away with it.
Mhm.
And you kind of feel very happy that he did. And yeah, it's very odd the way it works. But I don't know if maybe this is why they did this in the Hopper movie, because I don't remember getting that feeling from the Matt Damon version. Like, I don't know if it's because you see him murdering these people and it's just more in your face, but in the book you sort of are rooting for this guy. You're absolutely rooting for him to win. And I don't think it works in film. So I don't know if that's why this Hopper one is so different, where it's like it's obvious from the get-go that he's wackadoodle.
Mhm. I think part of the problem with the 1999 version, Anthony Minghella, I think was the name of the director, is that they're sort of playing him like a creepy psycho, which may be the case, but you can't play him like a creepy psycho because we're all sitting around going, ugh, I don't want to spend time with this creepy psycho. Well, in the books and in Talented Mr. Ripley and the others, he's very he has a lot of good taste. He's very fun. You kind of follow him. He's actually very emotionally rich also. Like he really does feel deeply about different things. He's on the brink of tears often about the murders, even though he doesn't seem to feel guilty about them. He feels bad that they had to happen, seems to be his kind of justification. And so, because I don't think you ever see him from anyone else's perspective, you're not spending time with another third person, limited, omniscient
But
character.
I think that's why film struggles, because
Yeah.
film has to be third person. Like,
Hmm.
you can't get in his head. You're only watching his external actions, and he's insane.
Yeah.
So again, I don't know if that's why, like, the
Yeah. It
75
just
version was
doesn't
like,
work.
forget it. We're not going to bother trying to make him look like he's like a decent dude. He's just going to be wearing a cowboy hat and laughing when an ambulance blows up. Like, it has I mean, I
Mm,
haven't seen the movie, but it reminded me of, like, it struck me as having a similar vibe to, like, the Joker,
mhm.
where it's just sort of has this vibe of, like, this is a dude who just wants to watch the world burn, and he's just gonna have fun on the way.
Yeah.
I don't, like, or at least if he has to blow up an ambulance and watch it explode on a beach, he's gonna dance and laugh and clap. Like,
Mhm.
he's not utilitarian.
Yeah. Yeah, in the book of this, the third book, Ripley's Game, he he's an Epicurean and he has these sophisticated tastes, right? At this point in the book, he's in this point in the series, like he's bought a harpsichord and he's working on the Goldberg variations. You could really see how where Thomas Harris got Hannibal Lecter from, who Hannibal Lecter is obsessed with the Goldberg variations in the Silence of the Lambs book. So there's clearly this is a predecessor to that character. Um, and so he isn't this like watch the world burn. He likes his world. He likes his money. He's actually married at this point to a French heiress who he refers to as appropriately amoral. Like she's just amoral enough that she's happy that he has this money, but she doesn't want to know where he got it from. And so he's like, this is a good match for him. And the scene where I think some of the difference is the scene where he blows up the ambulance, which is just a car in the book. He sets it on fire. You actually get that from Jonathan's point of view, a little bit, and he's setting it up, and looks up in the sky, and it's not on a beach, it's in a forest, and he sees a tree with leaves on it, with brand new leaves, and he's going, "Oh, this is such a shame that when I burn these corpses, the fire might scald the new leaves and kill them. Then they won't be alive anymore. And that's such a shame because they're just brand new." And you're like, "You- you're burning corpses to death in the middle of the woods. Why are you worried about the leaves?
But
Um,
that's the book, though. I guess that's my point. Is
yeah, yeah,
that's the
yeah.
book. That's
Mhm.
not the movie.
You
The
can't do that
19
in the
this
movie. Yeah.
You can't do that in the movie. What's he
Mhm.
going to do? Look up there? Again, that just strikes me. And even if you did do that in a movie, it would come across as ludicrously pretentious.
Mhm.
That would be the bag floating in the parking lot, American, beauty
Beauty.
style. The
Mhm.
that's what that would be. It would be ridiculously pretentious. You couldn't do it.
Mhm.
David Lynch could do it.
David Lynch is ridiculously pretentious. I, I like David Lynch, but he is ridiculously pretentious.
Yeah,
He's so pretentious. He's actually come back around, and
he's
we kind of like
honest. Yeah,
respect it. Yeah,
yeah.
we actually respect it
Mhm.
because he's so pretentious. I actually have total respect for his work. But most people, if they did it, would come across as who directed? Was that Raimi? Who directed American Beauty?
Oh, Mendez.
Mendes, yeah.
Sam Mendes. Yeah.
Yeah, Sam Mendes, not Sam Raimi, Sam Mendes. And, it's just like that is the most pretentious piece of garbage I've ever seen. So, that
Mhm.
that stupid scene with the trash bag. And that's the problem is like you it would take like a really delicate touch to pull it off, and I just don't think you can do it.
Mhm.
So that's why I think the director of this movie was just like, screw it. He's gonna be insane. He's gonna be but you like him and you appreciate why he's doing these murders, even though you get to see I love my favorite part of this entire movie is when the Zimmerman says to him is like, why did you do this? Why did you why did you do all this stuff? And he says he's like, when I saw you at that gallery, you said, I know you, and you said it in a very mean way. And he's like, that's why you did it? And he's like, and he goes, isn't that enough? And he's just this like, you made me feel bad. And so I set you on a course to murder mobsters. And it's absolutely believable. And it's really creepy. Because I mean, again, it does just have this feel of like, I've met people and probably been mean to some really psychos, and I wouldn't like how they would set me up this way. Like you can absolutely see the way that the mind sort of worked in this guy, and it just makes you feel like this one really makes you feel like, well, I could get wrapped up in that pretty quickly. It has it's really cool. I liked the movie. It was really disturbing. I found it very uncomfortable in the beginning.
Yeah, I like the movie a lot. I think it's sometimes a little too direct or too bald in what it's doing. I watched it with my girlfriend, and whenever there's a Ripley scene, they have like a lot of green. And whenever there's a scene where Jonathan's about to kill someone, especially in that Paris bus station, there's a lot of red. And she would just go, green, money, he likes money. Red, ooh, murder, blood's coming. Green, money guy, he wants money.
Yeah, but
Red.
Ripley has very red. He has very red sheets.
He does.
His
He
red
does.
satin
Yeah.
sheet.
Yeah. I think you could sometimes see through the lens, but I really like that scene. And I think what make that the scene you mentioned where he says, isn't that enough? And I think what makes that scene great too is Bruno Gantz, who plays Jonathan, just laughs. Like I loved his performance because as unhinged as
He's
Hopper is,
great. Yeah.
yeah, he's great. As unhinged as Hopper is, I found him Bruno Gantz playing Jonathan far more unhinged because he's at the beginning a normal guy, but his reactions to things are like sort of that of a manic depressive as he gets into these murders. Because Ripley says that to him, and he just kind of laughs, like or when he kills someone, he gets away with it. He's walking through the streets of Paris, just giggling. And you could see this guy who isn't a psychopath. It's pretty clear he's this gentle man whose emotions become. It's not like he becomes just cruel, even though he does. He starts abusing his wife and etc. His emotions stop matching. They stop matching the action, and so you don't know what his response is, and not necessarily what he's going to do. Like he's going to do something crazy at any given time, but his emotional reaction to things is very, very strange or unexpected, and I really like that. I also
Well,
really
that's
like
why.
his
I mean,
face. This is
I
beautiful
thought
face to watch.
KJ's observation earlier when we were talking about this earlier. I thought his observation that he has a Walter White quality.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities between this and Breaking Bad, right? I had trouble following the movie. I'm still not sure exactly what happened.
Yeah, I did too, but I
But
didn't care.
we follow. Well, it seems like the earlier stuff you're supposed to pay attention a lot to figure out the Agatha Christie plot, but the more recent movies you're barely supposed to watch because there isn't. But either way, in this one, we're following the framer, right? Would you say Dennis Hopper was the lead in this? Right? He's barely in
He's
it.
not the lead. No, Bruno Gantz. I think that's it.
He's the lead. He's the
Bruno,
lead
yeah.
in the same sense that, like, Anthony Hopkins is the lead in Silence of the Lambs. Like,
Yeah.
But in the book, who was the lead?
It's it's mostly Jonathan is more in the book. And when what happens is Ripley is entirely in the background except for the first chapter until the train. What ends up happening is
Okay.
once you see Jonathan on the train, it becomes clear this guy's no idea how he's going to deal with this problem. Suddenly, Tom Ripley walks in, and you go, oh, okay. But first of all, like, because Tom's going to be able to figure this out, and also you're like, I'm reading a Tom Ripley book. Where is Tom Ripley going to? Is he just? I thought what she was going to do was she was just going to have Tom Ripley be the guy at the beginning who ignites who lights the match, and then you never see him again. But
Okay, so it was similar in the book
yes.
that all of a sudden he kind of come. Okay, so so this yes feels very much like a Breaking Bad story in that we're following this framer who is living a normal life. There's rumors that he's going to be sick, so a little bit different, right? Walter White is literally diagnosed with a terminal disease, and then for some reason the framer decides, oh, all right, well I'll start making money by killing people. I didn't understand why he made that decision.
well, he had it thrust upon him. He basically had the guy tell him, like, you're dying if you murder these people, I will give you money.
And I've been fortunate not to be in that scenario, but I, I still don't think that would be my go-to if a stranger said, "Hey, you're dying, even though your doctor says you're kind of fine. I have one
Well,
that's going
his
to tell you you're dying."
That was
Mhm.
contrived. I gotta say, I'm like, I'm sorry. I think you would have seen through that. Like, it's pretty obvious if someone was like, I'm going to take you to Paris to go see my doctor. I'd be like, I don't think that's, you know,
I don't know you.
yeah,
Why am I going
that
to
was
go?
contrived. That was didn't work. Is that in the book, Tom? Did they do that
Yeah, that's
differently?
what happens in the
That
book.
was that
He
was
goes to
contrived. That
his
didn't
doctor,
work.
and yeah.
I also felt like having seen Strangers on a Train, I'm like, oh, so Patricia Highsmith just likes to have murders committed by people who, are random and aren't associated with the people so that they can't be tracked. And like, no, she's done this before. She's just like recycling this idea with
Yeah.
mobsters now. But it's
Mhm.
just fine. I mean, I
Yeah.
just think it's funny that it's
Mhm.
sort of like, it just struck me as it's like James Cain, and he's like, I do insurance murders, people who murder people for insurance money. That's what my murders are. And Patricia Highsmith seems to be like, I murder people who seem to have no reason to murder the people, and so that's why you can't figure out who they are. Like, I just thought
Yeah.
it was funny. But anyway,
I guess if you have a leitmotif, you use it until you can't, right?
yeah. But anyway, to KJ's point, I did not buy. I did not
Mhm.
buy why he believed this person was
Mhm.
the French doctor. I think you just go, okay, we're just gonna wave hands and admit that that's apparently he's. I mean, the only thing that they give a little bit of justification is when he's talking to his own doctor and this is where you could actually make a good case for it as to why he believes is why he does it, because his own doctor, when he keeps going to him saying, can you give me the results, can you give me the results, and his doctor says, I think you want them to be bad,
Mhm.
because he's like, I think you want them to tell you that you're dying, because there might be a part of this guy, this might be the argument you could make, he wants to do this. He's thinking, this is a great opportunity for me to make a lot of money. I have never made any money in doing what I'm doing. I'm dirt poor. I can't even buy toys for my kids half the time. I want to make a lot of money, but I can't justify murdering people unless I'm dying.
Mhm.
So if I can get a doctor to tell me that I'm dying, I will accept it. You could make the argument that that's what he's doing, but I still wouldn't buy it. But I
Yeah.
think that's the only argument you could really give, is that he actually does want to do the murders, but he doesn't do them because of that.
Yeah. And that's kind of a Walter White thing, right? Walter White, in the end of one of the seasons, or in the middle of one of the seasons, Walter White finds his cancers are in remission, so he actually doesn't have to do this anymore. And the episode ends with him going into the bathroom and kind of punching out a not a toilet paper, a paper towel dispenser. He just kind of puts a hole in it because he's so angry that he has no moral justification for doing this thing, because he just loves doing this thing. And he knows it's bad, but he needs this kind of like gun to the head to quote unquote force him to do it. In the
I will
book,
throw out one request. I have not finished Breaking Bad, so
oh, how
please.
far are you in?
I'm in the
So,
middle of the fourth season,
okay,
so
okay, this
please
is
don't. I know that is not, but please don't end it. Please do not tell me how it ends.
so you know how in the end of Breaking Bad, no, never mind, we won't, we won't do
Yeah, that was what I was waiting for you to be like. And then when Walter does, I'm like, no,
that. Um,
no.
yeah, but I think that is a good comparison. It's like the good man who's quote unquote compelled, but actually wants to do the bad thing. Because in the book, there is a not a long stretch, but when he first gets the money, he gets like a third of the money for one of the murders, the first murder. He goes out and buys a couch that he normally couldn't afford. He buys his wife a new suit that he couldn't normally afford. He starts spending money on things, and not the mortgage or money for his kids' college, though I don't know how worried people were about that in 1974. But he likes spending
Germany has
money.
very good public universities.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Okay, so fair enough. He isn't saving the money initially. And granted, he's not blowing through all of it because there is a lot of it, but he isn't really filled with grief or remorse for killing someone. That doesn't come up. And part of it in the book is they're mobsters, and so there's a lot of talk about how horrible the mafia is and how they do all these things, and the person you killed almost certainly killed someone else, so don't worry about it. It's sort of they're sort of positioning them as stormtroopers, which is a little disappointing because in the earlier books, Highsmith does not do that at all. But this man, I think, to
I
to
think
your
by
point,
this
Pat,
point she just wanted to have fun. She wanted Ripley to
yeah,
be able to just go out and have at it. Like I do
yeah.
think that's part of what it was.
And Ripley is sort of more of a superhero in this book. I mean, the mob keeps.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like he just shows up. He's a fixer. He's
Mhm.
like, he's like in Pulp Fiction, drive the speed limit. We will do, it's just like he just shows up, he cleans things up, he
Y-
fixes the problem.
Yeah, but I mean, it's in the book. There's three mob attacks. So there's the mob attack on the train where they have to. Then the mob attacks Ripley at his house, and then they attack Jonathan at his house. And in all cases, Ripley like James Bonds them all. He just, he's a very different character from the character in the first book, who you don't get the sense that this man is incredibly physically
Again, he
dead.
beats every single one of them. He grabs the object nearest at hand that is a heavy thing and hits them with it. That's all he ever
Yeah,
does.
yeah.
I mean, he literally just he grabs a heavy object that is near at hand and beats them to death with the thing that's
Mhm,
there. It's how so he is absolutely not clever. He
mhm,
is absolutely it's only afterwards that he's like, "Okay, shoot. I
mhm.
did this thing. Now what do I do?" And then he's absolutely calm and cool. Like I love when he kills Freddy in the book, who's played by Philip Seymour Hoffman in the movie.
It was great. He's the best part
Who's
of that
great.
movie.
He's the best part of that movie. I love Philip Seymour
Yeah.
Hoffman. When I became a theater major, when we did basic acting, we had to write a little essay on who was our favorite actor, and I wrote my essay on Philip Seymour Hoffman. I love Philip Seymour Hoffman. So he's great. So in the book, he basically murders this guy who just comes in, who realizes that, like, wait a minute, who realizes that Ripley is pretending to be Dickie the whole time, and is like, wait a minute, now I figured it out. Like, you have stolen his identity. And so as soon as he comes in to try to talk to him, Ripley picks up an ashtray and beats him to death with an ashtray. So it's like, and then though he sits there and is like, okay, well, I have to cover this up. I'm going to pretend we had a party. And so he sets out all the drinks and drinks all the drinks and smokes all these cigarettes and does this huge it takes him like 8 hours to set up the scenario where he can hide the body. And that's when you're like, wow, this guy is so clever. Because, and you kind of ignore the fact, because the murder only takes like, a half a page, not even a quarter of a page. But his covering up of it takes like 10 pages. And you basically go, oh, this guy's so clever. Look how clever he is. And you do ignore it. So that's the thing with him in those books, is he's not strong. He's not a Superman. He does nothing very well. He's only after he's done something drastic or rash that he then covers it up well.
Yeah. And by Ripley's game, he's a bit more of a superhero. He's, knocking out mobsters and taking their gun and then shooting down the other mobsters who are coming in. It's a little bit different. I'd say the third book is kind of disappointing. The second book is a lot of fun. I don't know if it's as much fun as the first book, which is really disturbing. But the second book, it's a little simpler because you have in the first book, and you see this really in the 1999 version, this idea of like, why is he actually killing Dickie? Right? I think that's something that's kind of compelling. He seems to be killing Dickie because Dickie rejected him, or because Dickie thinks he's gay and he doesn't want Dickie to think he's gay, or he wants to become Dickie, and he kind of doesn't know he wants to become Dickie until he actually kills him and he realizes that's a possibility. Now that he's dead, he could actually just take on his personality. And so there's this kind of mix of reasons that are kind of hard to define.
Yeah, it's all of them. I think it's
It's
all of them.
all of
Yeah.
them, yeah. I mean, in the movie, it's just he kind of confesses to Dickie like we should be together in an intimate way, and then when Dickie rejects him, he's sort of out of spur of the moment emotional reaction beats him to death. Um, in the book, he plans it. He knows he's going to kill him before they go onto that boat, and he's just waiting kind of for the opportunity for them to be far enough away from land to do it. And so it's a different thing in that sense. When you get to the other books, and I think when you get to this, especially with the adaptation, he's doing it for money. He's doing it to protect his financial interests, and he feels bad for Jonathan, which they also play up in the movie in a weird way, which I'm interested in what you guys thought of that in The American Friend, how affectionate Dennis Hopper's Ripley is for Jonathan. But in these books, he's protecting his financial interest, or he's sort of protecting Jonathan because he feels vaguely guilty. And he's able to protect Jonathan because he has a sort of superhuman instinct for violence in the third book, especially. Um, but what did you guys think of like why Ripley is helping Jonathan in the second half of the movie?
I have no idea. I have no idea why they were killing people, right? Why was Jonathan killing people? Why was Dennis Hopper killing people? Why was anybody killing anybody? I have no idea why he showed up on the train and then saved the day, and then they like almost make out in the bar, right? He is very attracted to
Yeah, I
Jonathan
mean,
in
Tom
this
Tom
in
is
this
Tom is
movie.
Tom is gay. I mean, it's very
Yeah.
obvious he's gay in all of these things. Yeah.
Okay, great. That that's fine, but they don't go anywhere with
No,
that,
because I don't think Tom ever
right? Jonathan
does. I
leaves
don't
him
think
on the
Tom ever
beach.
actually
Yeah.
does. Tom is so Tom is gay, but he's terrified of being gay. So he's always attracted to men, but he never actually. I mean, that's why again the Matt Damon movie was a bit of a disappointment because it's sort of like it would have been. It's more interesting to have this character who is gay, but who is violently opposed to being gay. Um, so so I think that's what's going on there a little bit. But I mean, the reason he's doing it is that the obvious like the reason they go to the Zimmerman and they say like you should murder these people is because Tom they went to Tom and said you should murder these people, and then Tom said I don't want to do it, I don't like murdering people, you should go to this guy because he's dying anyway.
So let's start right there. So I'm watching this. I've never seen a Ripley thing. Never. I heard the title "Talented Mr. Ripley," but honestly, I thought it was the same thing as Ripley's "Believe It or Not." I didn't know what they were. Like
Yeah, very
sometimes
different
he's
Ripley.
talented, sometimes he's figuring, right? No idea. And when we were texting about it, I thought you guys were just talking about Alien, the movie Alien.
Oh, that's
with
what-
That's what I was wondering what you were talking
I was really confused by your text.
and I don't even know if they call him Ripley until about
They call him
halfway
Tom.
through
They
the
only call him
movie.
Tom.
Mhm.
Yeah, they only call him Tom.
They only call him Tom. I had no idea what you guys were talking about, Ripley, right? So the movie starts and someone says, "Hey, Dennis Hopper, go kill these people." And he's like, "No, why would I kill him?" I'm like, "All right, rational guy." And then all of
He
a sudden,
murders
they
people all
ask
the
the
time.
framer, right? The framer. The only thing we know about the framer is he's really good at framing. He used to be good at restoration, but he has a disease that he can't do that anymore. But it's completely unclear if he has a disease at all, and if that affects his restoration.
Well, they say.
why
I
can't
mean,
he restore
the only
things
thing
if he
I think it
doesn't?
might have been a little clear because they do say he has a blood disease. I think that would have been clear as that was leukemia. Like
Mhm.
that was what that was called. If
Yeah.
someone said you had a blood
Oh,
disease, you had
okay.
leukemia.
Mhm.
Leukemia. So then he did have a.
He did,
He
but I
did,
think
but
he's
it's
in
in
remission.
remission.
He's in remission. He's been cured of it.
Okay, so he might be able to restore paintings one day.
Yeah, I think the implication is that he basically got diagnosed with leukemia. It he's clearly a nervous guy, and he had to go through probably some pretty excruciating treatments. I mean, they show that at certain points when he has
Yeah,
to, like, get the
it
blood test
looks
done. Like,
painful. Yeah.
he has to go through some really brutal and treatments and this kind of stuff. And so he couldn't, he could build a frame, but he's not going to be doing fine restorations, I think is the implication. But he's so nervous and he's so upset that he's actually going to die, that when someone comes to him and says, "Oh no, you are dying," even though it's a random dude, he accepts that this dude must know something that he doesn't. And so he's like, "Well, if I'm going to have any money to give to my kids, I have to go do these murders." So then I think he does all the murders, or he does the murder of the dude on the subway train. And then Ripley finds out and is like, "Oh, great! I'm glad he sort of thinks it's a joke because he did set him up to do the first murder. And then when he finds out the mobster wants him to do more murders, he's like, "That's not fair. This was supposed to be a one. I was just doing this as a joke. This is how insane Ripley is. Is he's like,
Okay.
I was doing it as a joke. I thought it was funny to make him do one murder. I didn't think you can't have him do more. That's mean. Like, this is the way Ripley's mind works. Is like, that's unfair. He was mean to me once. He said he sort of insulted me a little bit, so I set him up to have to commit a murder because I thought it was funny. But now you're using him, and that's cruel." And I think when the scene where they're doing the whole thing is when he goes to the shop and he meets the kid. He meets, is it Danny? Which I think it's Danny. He
Hmm.
meets the son, and he meets the
Oh
son
yes.
in the store, and now he feels bad because he's like, "Oh, I think this is sort of the way that Ripley's morality works, is it's like, oh, I just wanted to I thought one murder was funny. This is me now. This guy has a family. You shouldn't make him do more murders." And he knows if this guy has to do it on a closed train, sort of Murder on the Orient Express style, that he's gonna get caught. Like, they know they're just gonna keep using this guy until this guy eventually gets caught. Like, they know that's what they're gonna do with him. So he's like, "You know what? I'm gonna stop it now." And I think that's why Ripley then shows up on the train and starts murdering people.
So let's talk about the train a little bit. The storyboard must have been insane. Like, oh wait, I go back into the bathroom again now, or am I on the outside of the bathroom? No, no, no. You're gonna be on the inside, but then you're gonna come back out, and he's gonna go back in. But he's already been in there twice. Yeah, but we need him to be back in
Yeah,
there.
that had been.
At some point, we're gonna say knock 3 times, but that's not gonna matter. And other people are gonna knock and try to go in, and Jonathan's not even gonna try to stop them from going in. He's just gonna look at them. Dennis Hopper's gonna tell him to move on, but not Jonathan. What a confusing Looney
I
Tunes
mean,
bonkers.
that had a feeling of, like, rumors, or noises off, or arsenic and old lace. I mean,
Yeah.
that did. And again, I don't know. Maybe that was the point. It was supposed to be farcical. It was supposed to just be these slamming doors as people try to figure out who's going to go poop. That was generally the feeling of it.
Yeah, and the book, it's kind of hard to picture what that would look like. There's only three people. There's one mobster, one and two bodyguards, and one bodyguard they end up getting. It's hard to imagine how Jonathan would actually succeed in doing this, because they give him a garrote and they're like, okay, you can't shoot anybody on a train because you'll get caught. So you'll just strangle this mobster who has bodyguards around him to death in the middle of a train in his carriage. And I think that's why Ripley goes, because he's like, he's not going to be able to do that. That's not, he's either going to lose his nerve or he's just going to die. So I'm going to go there and I'll improvise it because I'm very good at improvising and improvising with blunt objects, especially. That seems to be his specialty. So in the movie, yeah, in the book, it isn't that, like you're saying, noises off type scene. It's a little bit more believable, but it's very, very hard to picture. You can't figure out where are all the other people on the train? Why aren't they going to the bathroom? Is this the private bathroom for this one mobster? But there's
I mean, it's like,
also,
I've been on Amtrak. That would never
yeah, that would never
that would
happen.
never work.
And there's also references to like the other mobster. How they kind of get caught is there's the other guy on the train. There's the other bodyguard who goes and looks around, and later it's kind of clear, oh, he saw Ripley and he remembered his face, and that's why they're able to locate them. Yeah, so it's just so there's clearly a bunch of other people on this train, and yet they don't come in. Yeah, so I agree. I think it's a little it's a little silly, and I'm not entirely sure what Jonathan is doing. There's something with the gun where he seems to be at one point looking to leave. Like, he puts the gun away. Like, I'm not going to use the gun. Yeah, so I think that scene doesn't really work very well.
I don't know. Did you care though? That's I mean I didn't
Yeah.
care. Like
Mm.
I just thought it was fun
Hmm.
to to watch this absurd,
Hmm.
again, it's just like it's an absurd murder thing. You just kind of have to go and be like, well, I'm just going to root and hope these guys manage to murder all these people.
Hmm.
Like and that's what I think, they do a good job of setting that up. It's an interesting setup where you hope that these two guys get away with multiple homicides.
Hmm.
I never did.
Oh, I
Oh,
did.
Again,
really?
maybe this
Oh,
is
I did.
Mm.
the Ferris Bueller problem again, but I from the beginning, neither of them seem like decent human beings. Right? The
They're
framer does
not.
until right.
Who cares?
Yeah.
What else did you? I mean, I kind of see where you're coming from, KJ, but I did have fun with the movie, and um, I, I also and so to change directions maybe a little bit. Another thing I found interesting too was the setting. It's a really decayed and interesting world, and I think part of this is we saw this with Fassbinder's movie World on a Wire. This kind of looks like World on a Wire, right? The
It's got a lot of the oranges from
yeah.
that. Hmm.
It's a 70s television show done by another kind of German in this style. It has the kind of the same pace. It has the same kind of, it looks like decay. And I think what's interesting about this is it's filmed in, I believe, Hamburg. Is that correct?
That's where they were
Paris.
trying to get the Beatles
Yeah,
in the movie.
yes, exactly. He won't drive the Beatles anymore.
I- Is that something Ripley does in the books? He gets the
No,
Beatles to go to Germany
No, he
and
just
no.
lies. He just lies a lot.
It's not mentioned in the book.
oh.
He also
He
there's
lies about everything. He just
yeah,
constantly lies.
yeah. There is one scene where he listens to the Beatles, but that's about it. It also that scene seems out of place too because he seems much more high culture. I always get the impression he wouldn't listen to the Beatles because it's not it's after 1900 or something like that. But he does in one scene listen to the Beatles for some reason. But yeah,
That
no,
wasn't Jonathan listening to the Beatles? That was
oh,
Dennis
does he?
Hopper?
In the book, Ripley at one, it's not a really, it doesn't really matter. At one point, he puts on the Beatles and is like, "This makes me happy," and then that's the end of the scene. But the city, so you have Hamburg, you have Paris, and then you have New York, and it's interesting. They're kind of indistinguishable, right? These three cities, the way they're filmed,
When
especially
did they go to New York?
Yeah,
in
I
the
don't remember
oh, they're
neither.
in New York. The artist is in New York. In the beginning and the end,
Is he?
he's in New York. Yeah, they're in New York City.
Where? How do you know
Are you
that?
sure?
They're on they're on the east side of this of the south part of Manhattan.
Are you sure that's not just because that's where they happen to be filming, but you're supposed to be in Hamburg? Is this like in
Yeah.
Rumble in the
Oh,
Bronx where there are mountains in the background and you're supposed to be in the Bronx?
I
Like,
thought
I don't know.
I thought they were supposed to be in New York because they're all speaking English there. All the people there are speaking English, like a New York City accented
Oh, I
English.
never noticed that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
and
didn't
that's where
remember that.
Nicholas Ray Derwitt is. Nicholas Ray's
Right.
Derwitt.
Didn't the painter say you're wearing a cowboy hat in
He says, "Did you
Germany?
wear that in Hamburg?"
Hmm.
Oh, well then, okay, maybe
Yeah,
they're in New York.
But maybe
yeah.
they are. I just assumed they were in like Berlin or something. But he does say, "Were you wearing that in Hamburg?" And he says, "Yeah, why not?" Oh, maybe that. Oh, I did not pick up on that.
There's supposed to be. I'm pretty sure there's supposed to be in New York. There's supposed to be in Paris. There's supposed to be in Hamburg.
Well,
And the
then New York did
threes.
not make an impression, so I think we have to focus on Paris and
Yeah,
Hamburg
yeah. But I think that's the idea. Like these
and
cities.
München. They go to München. They go to
Oh,
Munich.
do they? Okay.
Yeah,
I don't remember that. But
where the doctor is. Oh no, that's right. The
oh,
doctor's in Paris, but they go to the train is going to Munich.
mhm. Yeah. But I think the cities all look like the same city. It's really hard to tell them apart. Everything looks like they're decaying. At least in Hamburg, you could see the kind of colors that used to be there. You could imagine that looked really pretty and vibrant at one point and no longer does. And I will say, I wonder what you guys thought of it. I love the look of the movie. And
Yes, I did like that.
yeah, in the Ripley books, there's this the sense of setting is a sort of upper class sense. She's really seems to be trafficking in these kind of upper stratum of society, but with a bunch of criminals, right? It's that kind of fun, urbane criminal type thing. We think maybe like of a cat burglar or something like that, even though these people are far more psychopathic than a cat burglar. But in this world, it's all decay. Even Ripley's house, which is enormous, is like it looks like it's falling apart. And there's that weird like alley thing where the windows are to sneak into his house, or people keep sneaking to his house. It's like it's kind of gross. You can't imagine what the inside looks like or why anybody would want to live there, even though it's enormous. And I love that kind of feel, that kind of sense of setting. Um, that I thought was really really cool. The other thing that I was wondering about, what you guys thought, which I didn't quite get, was the framing device of the painter who we see in the beginning, and that's the last thing we see too, right? As after this is all over, we see DeWitt played by Nicholas Ray, this kind of like famous American director, kind of coming out of his like greasy apartment in New York and whatever, looking at the sun setting. Um, and that's something I couldn't quite figure out why that painter stuff was there.
I thought it was just to establish that Dennis Hopper was a shyster.
Why do you end on that note though? You don't end with Hopper with the painter, right? You just end on
Yeah,
him.
he goes back and says, "Hey,
Oh yeah,
you
yeah.
didn't use the same blue."
Mhm.
And then to like absolutely prove that he's a shyster, like, you noticed that? Oh no, I didn't notice that. It didn't really matter, but I just want to let you know that there's other artists out there that are
Mhm.
noticing the.
Mhm. No, that's interesting because who notices the blue isn't right? It's Jonathan, right?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
framer. Yep.
framer,
Yeah, which kind of leads that might be part of the justification for Hopper's Ripley for doing what he's doing, right? Is first of all he's rude to Ripley, but also he notices the forgery.
And it's actually the other way around in order. Hopper notices that the framer notices the forgery, then the framer is rude to Dennis Hopper.
Yeah. So is it like returning to the spark that lighted the dynamite, that type of thing?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah,
To end
I
it
think
on?
that's actually it's sort of it settles you back in, because I mean I guess it's like what else would you end on? You sort
Mm-hmm.
of settle back at the original insult, the original, and sort of and maybe it's just like, oh, none of what happened before has affected Ripley at all. He's
Mm-hmm.
gone right back to what he did.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because otherwise we would have left him on the beach, right? We would have wondered, did he get away from there?
Mm-hmm.
But even if you show him, it's not like you're going to show him. You're not going to show him back he hasn't gone to London. He hasn't run away to Moscow. He hasn't got, he's just, nope, he's right back doing his forgeries. And he's told the forger, hey, you made a mistake. And you need to fix that next time. Someone pointed that out to me.
I think I really like the faces of the people. I especially like Bruno Gantz's. I'm saying his name right. Bruno Gantz's his face. I like looking at it. I like his responses to things. I understand where you're coming from, where it's like, why are you believing this? Why are you
And
believing
then
the
not just
monster
believing
doctor?
it, but then making a drastic change to your life, your personality, the crimes you're willing to commit. Right? I I don't want to put this in the episode, but I imagine it's not easy to kill somebody. And if somebody was like, "Hey, go kill somebody," in order to say yes, you have to completely change who you are, I would think.
Yeah,
And that's not shown in the movie. He just is like, "Oh, okay."
did you find the train station scene to be pretty tense?
No, I thought there was no tension there because I didn't. Oh, sorry, the one with the first kill.
Yes.
Yeah, because I didn't care if he did it or not.
Mhm.
He falls asleep. There's no tension. He literally fell asleep. What are you talking about? The character couldn't even care. Why should I care? It made no sense. Oh, gee, I'm gonna commit one of like the 10 sins of Christianity. I'm literally gonna kill somebody else, but I just love the rocking of this train. I'm gonna. He has no stress about it. I mean, or it's a weird stress, I guess.
Yeah, I thought he was a little stressed out of it. I found that scene tense. And there's a weird foreshadowing moment in it. Did you see that where he goes on the flight, I think, to see the French doctor, and he's going up the escalator, and the guy at the top of the escalator trips, and then later it's when he kills the guy, he shoots him at the top of the escalator, and he falls over. And there's this weird foreshadowing moment of falling over at the escalator.
Later, like,
Yeah,
here's what's gonna happen, audience.
yeah.
People can fall on an escalator. And like, and then it's like, man, now you're running backwards down the escalator. The only advice you got was after you do it, act like a normal person and just walk away, which you can't do if you're on an escalator because then you'd have to cross over the body. So now you have to act like you have to make another weird decision to run down the escalator. And then they show you that the cameras caught him.
And nobody does
Doesn't
anything.
matter. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, I like the tone of it. I like the actors in it. I like looking at them. I like the decisions they were making. I understand where you're coming from, where you sort of have to insert into the film the sort of Walter White thing, right? Of I always wanted to do this. I think it's just I like the actors and I liked the sense of setting. It's a movie that really does it gives a sense of setting by giving no sense of setting. It gives a sort of world that's sort of falling down or has fallen down. It's oddly for a book that is very urbane and feels very European and sophisticated. This seems like a modern world that's fallen apart, right? It's not even the city that we saw in previous weeks, that sort of the asphalt jungle city. It seems to be like the city as desert, right? It's worse than that. Like things aren't going to come
I
out in
find I
each.
find these very depressing. I do find these very depressing. Like I like the early 40s, like I like the 40s and the 50s noir,
Mm.
where it's just sort of this fantasy world. Like
Mhm.
it's just there's no real reality here. Yeah, it's violence, but it's sort of just pseudo violence. Um, and there's a sense of style and things like that. Like, yeah, this has a feeling of like a Fallout video game. Like it's just there's just nothing here is,
Mm.
there might as well have been a nuclear bomb gone off
Mhm.
and they're living in a post-nuclear world. It might as well be.
Yeah, I agree with that. It looks like that.
Yeah, and they might as well, it might as well be this Tom Ripley is just squatting in a Thomas Jefferson Monticello mansion that he's only able to have because the rest of the world's dead. Like it does have that feel to it. But I still liked it. I like the sense of style. I liked this. I like it a lot more. I guess when we were talking about Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, this is far more disturbing, the violence in it, than Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is just graphic, but it's not visceral. This feels more just like it gets in you. It feels much more like it sort of burrows in and makes you very uncomfortable
Mhm.
in a way that Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is just like, watch this horrible thing happen and see it and don't turn away. Like it doesn't let you look away from it, which has a sense of horror, but it's more horror. That's like um Paris Hilton dying in, Wax Museum movie, like whatever, the House of Wax.
Mhm.
That's more that sense of horror. This has a much more burrowing sense of horror, and
Mhm.
it sort of makes you much more uncomfortable.
Yeah. Which is interesting because Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is, at least the book, is approaching the profound. It's trying to make a profound statement about its society. And so presumably that would be a far more unsettling thing to think that this is not some work of fiction that I'm looking in, that I'm living in this world. But it doesn't like you said, but it doesn't get under your skin. That book doesn't get under my
Because
skin.
it's this is the classic show don't tell.
Hmm.
It
Yeah.
this just sort of tells you. I feel like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is much more about telling you. And I know I said show, but it's telling you in the sense that, like, especially in the movie, it's telling you it's really terrible. It's telling you, like, look at this thing and see how horrible it is. Whereas, like, I still think that could be just a devastating movie if they had, and book, if they just pulled a little bit off the gas
Hmm.
and, sort of just made it more uncomfortable. They made the people who are really bad a little less, sort of like, less cartoonish, to your point,
Hmm.
Tom. I still really like the book. I liked, especially like the setting. But I think if you pulled a little bit off the gas, if you mixed these two and you made the really bad, Ripley still, despite the fact that he's really bad, is very attractive as a character.
Hmm.
If you do that, and it makes you think like, wow, a person that's really horrible can still be attractive, and you did that with Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and they're not just slimy, creepy people. You can really make that effective,
Hmm.
because that's the reality. People who are really bad don't necessarily, you don't feel it, you don't notice it until it's too late,
Hmm.
sort of thing. So
Yeah. And that's an interesting quality of the movie and the books. And I think it's a failure in the 1999 movie, which is in the book, the first book, Talented Mr. Ripley, nobody except possibly Freddie notices what Tom is.
no,
Dickie
Freddy's
does.
the only one. Freddie gets it from the day that he meets him.
Yeah.
That's what's interesting. Freddie gets it from the day that he meets Ripley. Is
Hmm.
he knows, and I don't know if this is because Freddie's also one of the only characters who's described as being really grotesque.
Hmm.
He's sort of not attractive. He's fat. He's
He's
sort of
red haired.
he's just like he just he's an outsider too, and he immediately is suspicious of Tom. He's just like, I don't like that guy. Something's wrong with him.
Hmm.
He picks up on it right away, and he's really the only one.
Hmm. Yeah, but everybody else in the book, including Marge, like Marge doesn't like Tom, but she comes around. At first, she doesn't like Tom, but she comes around because of what happens to Dickie, of Dickie's disappearance. In the movie, she never does. In the movie, she's deeply uncomfortable by him.
I also love it. I do like it's one of my favorite Gwyneth Paltrow roles. I think she's
Mhm.
so good in that.
Yeah, yeah, but it's still kind of a problem. And so eventually everybody comes around to Tom as being kind of deserving of this money and not not a problem, not a person who's crazy. And it's kind of impossible in the Talented Mr. Ripley, the 99 version, for that to happen. It seems pretty possible here. Like I could believe people will um be cool with kind of weird Dennis Hopper. Yeah, he's really weird and he records himself saying silly things and he takes photographs of himself for some reason over and over and over again. Yeah,
That was a weird scene.
that was a weird scene. He at one
That
point.
that also had like, that had a Thomas Harris feel to it. Just the like,
Yes.
just like the I don't know, there's something weird about that. And I guess I disagree. I don't think anybody would like that. I don't think anybody would like that Thomas Ripley. Who would hang out with that man?
I don't think you'd find him scary.
I would. I don't know, KJ.
If I was hanging out somewhere and that dude showed up, I would be finding an exit.
Yeah, he's
Fair enough.
bonkers. No.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true at all.
Right? A little too much energy, not quite enough energy at the same time. Bail. Like
There is no way I would trust that
Yeah.
Dennis Hopper.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
like even when I try to picture him now, I can only picture Woody Harrelson, which is just it's creepy. I don't know why I can't see Dennis Hopper. Like it was a creepy performance now that I'm thinking about it. When he comes on the train, he's got a big smile on his face, like, yeah, let's kill these
He was
dudes.
like, "This is the best part of my day." I mean, I really liked his performance, but I don't. No way would I want to be around that man. That man had nose. There is no like. That is not the man who. I mean, again, go back to the Talented Mr. Ripley. That is not a man who's going to meet a wealthy boat manufacturer at a bar in Midtown Manhattan and charm him into paying him to go find his son in Italy.
Mhm.
There's no way.
Yeah.
Like that's it, they're not the same character. That's why I don't really think this is actually a Ripley movie. I would argue this isn't actually Tom Ripley, or at least not the Tom Ripley that's in Talented Mr. Ripley.
Mhm.
It was just fine. I mean, many movies do that. But I would argue it's not really a Ripley movie. It's fine. I still like the character. I still like the movie, but it's not the same person. There is no way that man
Mhm.
ain't going into an he's not doing the things he did
Yeah,
in the original
he's
movie.
not like marrying a French heiress. He's just not,
No, he's
and
not charming Gwyneth Paltrow. Like
Mhm.
he's not.
Mhm.
He's going to lick what was her name, Rosini, what was her
Isabella Rossellini.
Isabella Rosini. Yeah, I'm like that that is much closer to that
Yeah,
Dennis Hopper.
yeah, fair enough. I
Have
wanna
you
s-
seen Blue? I'm guessing you haven't seen Blue Velvet, KJ.
No, I have not. I
Okay, that
think
would
I
explain.
actually have the Blu-ray here, but I've not actually hit
I
play.
love
Mhm.
Blue Velvet. That's also a
Yeah,
great movie, but
that's a good noir, which
that's Dennis Hopper's creepiest movie.
Yeah. Yeah. He's that's which is saying a lot,
Saying a
right?
lot.
Yeah.
That's Dennis Hopper's creepiest movie.
Well, I'm sorry you didn't like it, KJ.
KJ has not liked any of our. He hasn't liked any of these
We got
movies.
2 more episodes this season.
At least you're consistent.
And I'm learning a
Yeah.
lot.
You sound angry about that.
But I'm learning a lot.
It's the summer. I shouldn't be learning anything.
How many more? How many are episodes? Two. We have
We have two
Japan and
left.
Yeah.
Japanese, and then my favorite will
The
be
Name of the Rose.
Game of
Yeah.
the Rose.
Yeah. So where do we think this leaves us? So we'll finish off with this, I think, because I think we've dissected these things pretty well. In terms of this story of the detective and the noir and the criminal and whatnot, where does this leave us? I would say this is sort of bringing in the psychopath in a kind of new and visceral way. And I think like when you see later works like in the 80s and 90s with the psychopath, and I know Pat, you've said this before that that the killer inside me is really the introduction to that. But I think like with this, there's sort of a connection between the killer inside me and the ultimate detective fiction psychopath Hannibal Lecter. There's sort of a bridge at least with this
Yes,
character.
absolutely. Yeah.
But I don't know. Where do you guys think this leaves us in terms of this story of the show so far?
I mean, my conviction is that at this point the genre's dying. I think this is when it jumps the shark. This is when you're like, we're just gonna revel in murder. Like it does have this. It just has this feel of like it. It it really does. Like, and it's fine. I mean, I mean, I know Tom, you like Silence of the Lambs, or you hate Silence of the Lambs?
I'm not the biggest fan.
Okay.
It's my problem with Silence of the Lambs is it's this like really intense feminist picture that has a Marvel supervillain at the middle of it. So you have these scenes where she's going into these homes or she's having to deal with these local cops, and as this kind of small young woman has to deal with these local cops or these authorities, or go into these kind of sad West Virginian homes, which has this like really interesting touch of realism. And then she goes and talks to Hannibal Lecter, who's the only reason we're watching the movie. You're watching the movie to see Hannibal Lecter do things, and he's like winking at the camera, and it's a really weird, jarring kind of it's these two things that don't seem to work really well
But
together.
I guess this is my thing, is like the genre eventually just collapses into sort of just this celebration of violence and sort of this, and that's, we see that a lot in the SVU kind of things. I think SVU sort of does that in every single episode. They have to get more and more and more extreme in what type of violence and how graphic they're going to be, and what types of who can rape whom, and what's it just it keeps going and going and going and going. And this is where I just say, like, there's an escalation that happens that I guess you do reach a peak. And I don't think I don't, it's not why I like the genre. So this is where I start to kind of give up on it. But that being said, it's still original, it's still unique. It's just I prefer the 40s and the 50s, because I think that's when there's sort of still an exploration of the whole thing. They're really trying to plumb the depths of what they can get out of sort of stylistically, visually, plots. Plots, whatever, I don't really
Hmm.
care as much, but what they can do with the characters, this kind of stuff. So I find that period more interesting. Now this is where it just feels like they're just, how much worse can we get?
There's no detective or private eye, or like it's just the criminals, right? Is that
Hmm.
part of what's going on here where
I think
The
so. Yeah.
only detective is Ripley himself. He's the one who has to kind of piece it together and be like, "Oh, this is what they're doing. They're using this guy to murder all these people, and they're not going to stop." He's the closest you get, and
right?
it's not very good.
And I wonder if we did things a little out of order. I wonder if this happened, then the cold spaces showed up, because the girl with the dragon tattoo is really criminal, right? I mean, she's kind of solving cases as well, but she's criminal first, then detective. So
Hmm.
they kind of have she's not a psychopath in that, but she's not too
She
far off,
is. Oh,
right? Yeah,
she
a
is. Oh,
psychopath.
she is a
So
psychopath. She is.
they kind of then brought it back. They're like, all right, well, we had the psychopathic era, and now we just want to like put a cap on that and bring the detective back into that. So I wonder if
Hmm.
they blended the two to some
Yeah,
extent.
at that
Yeah,
point
they've sort of merged them.
Maybe that's a good
I don't think
point.
that's wrong. I think
Yeah.
that's accurate.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But it's not my thing. This is when I start to give up on it. So I'm really curious about the Japanese one. I have no
Yeah.
idea what the Japanese do with it, which I would
Yeah.
love to see.
I'm
As KJ has shown us, I think I really like Japanese movies, but I've never really seen very many except the ones that KJ has picked for us, and they're often really fun. So I'm very curious to see what they'll do with it. And Name of the Rose is just sort of a totally postmodern piece that feels like it was written for me. It's just
I've started the book, and yes, apparently
it is written for me.
He predicted your birth and authored this book
Oh man,
for when you came of
no
age.
No one else would like this, and it's so good.
I started it. I'm enjoying it.
I mean, I say that just sort of jokingly, but it's like it's a book that blends medieval philosophy and postmodern literature. Things no one else cares about.
With a detective story.
With a detective story, like it literally. I'm not even joking. It's just like that's. It really feels like it was written for me. So my guess is the movie is going to strip all of that, which is why I'm curious to see what the movie does with it.
Yeah, I haven't seen the movie yet. I'm scared to watch
no
the movie.
No movie is going to be discussing Pseudo Dionysius. There is no way, and yet this book has like 6 pages on him, so you're just not going to get it. So I'm very curious what Sean Connery will do with it.
Yeah, well, we will see. But I think next week we're going to Japan for Japanese noir, right? So I'm excited to maybe find some more energy in this genre. It seems to be flooding out of it as we've observed. Anything else you want to say about Ripley or about Wenders before we leave him behind? If you enjoyed Ripley's Game and are looking for more adaptations of Highsmith's Ripley material, check out Ripley's Game from 2002 starring John Malkovich, Purple Noon from 1960 starring Alain Delon as Ripley, The Talented Mr. Ripley from 1999 starring Matt Damon, Ripley Underground from 2005 starring Barry Pepper as the killer, and more recently in 2023 with Andrew Scott in the title role of the television series Ripley. You can rate and review this show anywhere fine podcasts are available. For those viewing in YouTube land, if you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the Talking Studios channel for all our exciting content, and follow us on social media at Talking Studios. Check out other shows by Talking Studios, including Talking Pictures Trivia, where we explore movies through trivia, Keep Making Movies, where we explore micro-budget films, Limited Lexicon, where we play through text-based adventure games, and Get the Point, where we slowly reveal a movie poster and try to guess which movie poster it is. Got a question for us? Call the Talking Studios hotline at 201-467-8679 and leave a message. It may be featured on a future episode. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Adapt It, wherever fine podcasts are found. Join us next time when we discuss Japanese spaces with Jules Dassin's film The Naked City from 1948 and look at the movie inspired by it, Akira Kurosawa's Stray Dogs from 1949.
Wow, Talking Studios.
Next week we'll be discussing The Naked City from 1948 and Stray Dog from 1949. KJ, if you can adapt either The Naked City or Stray Dog into any medium, what would it be?
So I think I'm going to go with Stray Dog on this one, Tom. And the lead in Stray Dog is none other than Mr. Mifune. And he's been in a lot of Kurosawa films, and he is great in this one. And I think it would be wonderful to have a post-war memorabilia line in the style of Elvis memorabilia, but it's all Mifune. All the different faces of Mifune on the plates, on the Christmas ornament. I don't know what was the Elvis memorabilia craze. I want to do the same thing with Mifune. I think that'd be great.
No, that
Do a
would be
little
very nice.
something for
Collector's
the hutch,
items.
Yeah.
Yeah, collector's items. I don't know how many people would go for that. It would be a very niche audience. It wouldn't exactly reach the Elvis crowd, but I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Maybe it'll be big in Japan. How about you, Pat?
So I would adapt either one of them, but I think it really would have to be Stray Dog. I don't think you could do Naked City, but I would do it as a stage play, just because I think it would be really funny. I really liked these ones. I think it's kind of I wish there was like a book or a play that they were actually being pulled from. It would have really been kind of fun for these. I feel like a book or a stage play, but I would say stage play because Stray Dog did have a lot. I guess we can kind of get when we get into it. Stray Dog had a lot more kind of compact scenes. Everything was much more enclosed. So I think you could turn that into a stage play, sort of reverse do this thing. What about you, Tom?
I think I would adapt Naked City into a police recruitment video in which you see how the police live every day, the opportunities you would have, and you could follow them around a little bit. I don't know how successful a police recruitment video this would make, since it seems most of the time you are just walking in circles in desperately hot weather, but that is probably what this film would adapt into best. You could probably do it for Stray Dog also, but that would really be a failure. That looks like a miserable police job, so that would be my adaptation.
And it ends with, "Hold on to your gun."
Oh, it could be like a Where's Waldo? I should have done that.
Oh, that would have been
Oh,
great. Yeah,
that would have been really good.
where's Waldo? But it's
Where's Waldo? Find, yeah,
his
where's his
cult.
gun? Where's
Yeah.
his Colt? All right.
All right.
Cabbage go, right?
Huh?
What's cabbage go?
I've never heard that.
Instead of lettuce go.
Oh.
Cabbage go.
I always say to my kids, I'm like, all right, cabbage go.
Mm.
It's my joke. I made it up. That's a Pat Gavin original.
That's a Pat Gavin original. No one else
No
came
one
up with
else
that.
ever gets it. Like, all right, cabbage go, boys. Cabbage go.
I just don't know how much I've said "let us go" to mean like let's start something.
Yeah, but you say like, let's go. You know, like,
Oh
all right,
yeah, let's go. Yeah, which
Let's
is
go.
a nice
And so
short
sometimes I'll be
form.
like, all right, guys, let us go. And so now I just say cabbage go instead of let's go. Cabbage go. Cabbage go.
Cabbage go.
It's the best worst joke ever. Right? It's brilliant.
Oh, you
The
are
more
a
you say it, the
you are
funnier
a
it gets.
dad. That's